Science can be rather daunting for a lot of readers, but Genome Jaunts is an excellent example of how complex scientific ideas like those of adaptations and genomics can be communicated in a simple yet engaging way. To give us a glimpse of how science communication works, we have Dr. Matthew, who will take us through some foundations of science communication with references from Genome Jaunts. Over to you, Dr. Matthew.
It is a privilege to speak on this topic in front of such giants in the field of done science communication. My talk is mostly for the kids or general audience who would probably not know what science communication means. So I just title this as the what, why, and how of science communication. So throughout my PhD, what I've done is I've been engaging in science outreach, and I've been writing articles and Genome Jaunts now tops a list of all the things I've done under the title of science communication. So that's where I would say that I'm a science communicator, and I hope that the audience also gets a flavor of how science communication is needed and how Genome Jaunts fits into that. So I welcome you to the what, why, and how of science communication. So before going into that, who is a scientist? So every time we think about scientists, this is the person who comes to everyone's mind, Albert Einstein. But there's also something which a common man thinks, that a scientist is a crazy person. But the reality is that we are not all that crazy, but we tend to stick to some behaviors like discussing. So a scientist is a person who has a hypothesis. He would do experiments to test a hypothesis, and he would publish those, he or she would publish those results in scientific journals. Now, this is where I'm going to emphasize that whenever a scientist is doing science and generating new information, they tend to put this information out into scientific journals, which is not really accessible to a common man. And throughout the career of a scientist, they keep on doing this. This is how a scientist operates. They have a hypothesis, they test it, they publish, they get some sort of feedback from the community in which they work. So the kind of communication they do is for their own peers who understand what they do, and they can get comments from this. So what is science communication? So it is said that all these scientists who work with each other and are communicating mostly with each other are in an ivory tower. So they have they really are cut off from the rest of the world while they are in this tower. And science communication is an attempt to send some of this information generated in the ivory tower to the rest of the world. So the idea is that through science communication, or for short, SciComm, the specific details, jargon, or the limited access information which the scientists put out in this are sort of collated and simplified as accessible, essential, and understandable information for the rest of the world. So this is just the simplest sort of definition for science communication. So, but why SciComm? Because science is for the society. So especially in a country like India, where most of the research is funded by taxpayers' money, each citizen of the country has a right to know what kind of science we do, what did we find when we do each of these mega projects. They just see a title on in a newspaper or so, but they rarely understand what is it that a scientist does in a lab. So it is for the benefit of the society when a scientist is ready to share their information in a more understandable term. It is for the benefit of the entire society. And I'll also come to another point. There is a selfish reason here, which I'll bring up at the end. So in the modern era of social media, all of us are somewhere in the chain of science communication. So I really like this cartoon which says, but all I did was hit the share button a lot. So when we are sharing any information, we think that, okay, I got this information, I need to immediately share it to at least 10 people I know. But Doctor said, that we have to be critical. It's not only that, okay, we got an information, immediately we are sharing to people as if we are suddenly the expert. We should also check from different sources which say about something. We have to check if the sources are reliable. And that is the only way we can actually stop this disinformation or conspiracy theories in its steps. And the best example we saw was during the coronavirus pandemic. Uh, Everybody, especially during the lockdown, was sharing something or the other thing. So there's this wonderful series of comics by Connie Hansen, which talks about the problem of the infodemic, in which anyone and everyone is giving their idea or opinion on things which should be really based on science. So if you have just passed on information, before doing that, you need to do fact checking. But it's not fair to say that the onus is on a common man to know which is right or wrong. Somewhere it is the responsibility of the scientists to also bring their knowledge which they are generating to the society. And we had guests who do this very, very wonderfully. Professor Gadakar, Professor Harini, they both of them are very, very avid science communicators. They write a newspaper, they write newspaper columns, and they also write books. So these are one of the ways in which someone can do science communication. So how to SciComm is about this. You like I said, science communicate first through something called as a scientific journal or scientific publication, but there is no limit to how science communication can be done. Like Professor Harini mentioned, right now, if you make an Instagram reel or a YouTube short, that is the best way to reach the minimum amount of audience. So there are different kinds of media written. For example, our book is a written form of media. There can be art. There can be documentaries on science, which all of you watch, like the National Geographic. There are podcasts. Nowadays, podcasts are more popular. There can even be performing arts which can explain the concepts of science. One of the brilliant things during the pandemic, especially, was how TikTok is one of the social media which completely took over SciComm by the storm. I'm just giving one example of a scientist. She goes by the handle Star Stricken. Her name is Serafina Nance. She's an American astrophysicist, and across her different social media platforms, she has at least 1 million followers, and she uses it very, very well to explain science to them, specifically space research. But another added thing about her is that she's also somebody who's a BRCA1 positive and has had double master. She also uses her platform to talk about science of the need for the screening of BRCA1 mutation. So this is how the online media has been a great tool for science communication. Another interesting way of science communication, which as PhD students we used to always discuss, is Dance Your PhD contest held by the American Association for the Advancement of Science. This is a competition where PhD students try to search through dance, and it will be a competition and people can send in. There was one year in which from India, social science PhD also got awarded this prize. So there are so many different ways to do science communication, but who is eligible to do science communication is a topic completely different, which we can discuss in a different forum probably. Like all of you mentioned, Genome Jaunts is actually a very unique attempt at SciComm. Why? Because usually a scientist would take a topic, think what audience would want to hear from them, and write for them. But in this case, we have one among from our audience on our side asking the questions, and then we are writing for that audience, keeping in mind similar audience of his age or his interest, right? So now, because it's titled as a workshop, I'll just take you through a couple of examples of how we went on a genome jaunt. So let's take this example of at the owl, the night flyer. So the distinct thing about Shreyas, like everyone mentions, is he will find a unique thing about the animal and describe it, not just the overall, okay, it is a bird, it can fly. But look at this, how he has put it. Many different features help an owl fly as quietly as a mouse, which is ironic as mice are its main prey. So that was his description of the owl. And the curious what make the owl a good nocturnal predator. Now, if we were to go and find the answer to this query, let's just think about doing a simple Google search. So this is interesting because this screenshot is from yesterday. Google was celebrating Pani Puri yesterday in its Google Doodle. So that is what you're seeing here. So back to the genome jaunt. When you put in owl genome and you just press search, these are the number of results which will come up. So now how do you sort through these many number of results? Let's just go through first few results. This is the first result. It says, so there is a link here. It says Wiley Online Library, Ecology and Evolution, New Genome Assembly of the Barn Owl. In the bracket, there is a scientific name with a list of authors who have written this. And it is published in February 2020. So from the look of this, you will understand that this is a scientific article. Okay, the Ecology and Evolution is a scientific journal. The second hit for the search was this. It is a blog post which says the genomics of being an owl. There is a very picture of the owl. Okay, and the third one was again something which said scientific reports. Comparative genomics sheds light on the predatory lifestyle of accipitrids and owls. Now you can see the difference between the two on the left and the hit on the right. Clearly, the left have the articles on the left have been written by scientists for the scientists. Like I don't know if somebody was to tell you that okay, read this article which starts with comparative genomics sheds light. I am not sure that I'll be able to hold an audience who's not interested in owls or genomics to sit there and read about it. So let me take you to the article, one of the articles which we have cited in the book. Its title is Avian Binocularity and Adaptation to Nocturnal Environments, Genomic Insights from a Highly Derived Visual Phenotype. Again, with a list of authors, it says it's a journal, Genome Biology and Evolution. Okay, so from this, you can understand that the writing is going to be really boring in general terms, as it's only a scientist communicating to a scientist who is very much interested in this particular aspect of the owl's biology. So even before we go into what is written in the text, let's just look at the figures. Sometimes even if we don't like the writing, maybe the diagrams with them are good. So this is one of the figures in the article which says phylogenetic correlation or big convergence versus there is a Latin character and then ratio, which will be read as omega. So the picture is supposed to show you the difference in between the skulls of the birds, depending on some scores given to genes across two different axes. So again, if a person was very much interested in understanding what has been written about an owl and its genome, but if they were to open this, it is not really digestible for a person. And even though they're as much interested in that topic as a person who is not, who has done the science research behind all this, they'll be stuck at this. Another figure here, again, this has parts of the eye, iris, eye cup, optic nerve. There are all these words which don't make sense, which is in italics. So these are all gene names. There are some lines put there. Again, for a common person to just look at this and understand, it's not easy. So then let's look at some of the text. In nocturnal environments, retinas are generally more sensitive, and the barn owl in retina in particular has several features that can be associated, etc., etc. So if you thought that, okay, this was just not accessible, let's go to something called as the conclusion. It says our results provide evidence that pseudogenization, differentiated, relaxed, and intensified selective signatures affecting eye structural genes, gene coevolution were the prominent molecular mechanisms associated with adaptations of the barn owl eye to the nocturnal environments. So at the end, we have what we needed, the adaptations of the barn owl eye to nocturnal environments, but everything written before that is a communication from a scientist to a scientist. So on the right now, you can see how we try to simplify this. Now, for this, we are always thinking about our audience. We were thinking that we should have someone like Shreyas in mind while we are simplifying this. So this is how we start. Since the owl is a nocturnal bird, scientists studying owl genomes look for genes with light-dependent roles. That's how we started. And if I were to specify which part we took from this for our genome, what the genome says, the specific sentence taken from this entire scientific context is the night vision adaptation of owls also includes enlarged eyes and binocular vision. This is made possible by the presence of some genes and the absence of others that are involved in eye formation in other birds. So this is how we took this entire scientific information and we simplify it for our audience who is around 10 years and above, who can still read this and feel excited. So there's also another point here that before we talked about even genes or proteins in this section, we have an entire chapter at the beginning of the book, which talks about the building blocks of life, which explains to you what a gene means, what DNA means, what protein means. So that is how we brought it to this content for this animal. Now, like Dr. Mitali said, there were other examples. So let's go on a genome again. This is another animal, although it's also another bird, but I picked this up because this had genome. The flamingo genome was available many years ago, but still we were unable to answer the query. That is because, once again, if you were to just to Google this thing, there are all of these results. But if you dig deep into this, there's only one result really which matters, which is this is a database of someone who was like Shreyas, who decided to just go and collect bird samples and just do genomics. But then after that, they never wrote anything on it. The maximum they have written for each of these genomes is this one paragraph, which says that, okay, we did this genome, we took the sample, we did this genome sequencing analysis, and this is what the data is there. But they never got around to doing the writing part of the genes, what or science communication. Which then brings us to why we need to do SciComm, because when there are gaps in such questions, we get a chance to find our future torchbearers of science. And science communication in a way is an attempt to find our future torchbearers. When we try to step down from our ivory towers and get to talk to people like Shreyas who are really interested in science, but just think that it's way too difficult for them to enter into. We hope that science communication can be that bridge in the future. So this is our selfish reason as scientists to do science communication, is so that we can keep our legacy going by finding bright young minds who will come into science and help us find more and more things and solve more and more mysteries. So that was my short session on science communication. If anybody has questions, I'll be happy to answer.